If you're hoping to catch some of the harvest here at Wood Family Vineyards, you'd better be a night owl because picking kicks off at 2 a.m. in a bid to beat the heat.
This isn't our first rodeo.
Rhonda Wood, winemaker and owner of Wood Family Vineyards, is not whining about the hot weather.
We've had warm Labor Day weekends before, so I think the farmers know how to work with it. The wineries know how to work with it. It's usually a short-lived thing. We hope.
From Saturday through Tuesday, the National Weather Service has issued excessive heat warnings for parts of the Bay Area. Wood plans to water the vineyard after Friday's early morning pick to prevent the grapes from dehydrating. In Livermore Thursday, temperatures reached over 100 degrees.
It's been hot.
Over at Cooter Ridge Wines, winemaker and owner Larry Dino is stopping harvest amid the high heat, but was able to get some of his grapes in ahead of time.
We've got our whites in. They came in earlier this week. So we've put all other stuff on hold until next week. So I would expect to get our grapes for our rosé towards the end of next week. We're going to wait till after the heat wave.
Like Wood, Dino will make sure the vineyard is well watered before the grapes shrivel up. But that could be challenging with temperatures expecting to hit triple digits over the holiday weekend. And one thing the heat is impacting, events. Dino canceled an outdoor concert.
It was a hard decision because our event was pretty much sold out, but we wanted to go ahead and make sure our customers were safe, and I assume we were going to have cancellations and such.
Both wineries will hold tastings indoors.
It's hard. We just do what we can do like everyone else.
We have a larger tasting room inside, and our music is planned to be inside this weekend. So we have music Sunday and we have music Monday as well. And hopefully, as long as the electricity holds up, we have air conditioning here.
Meantime, in town, other events have been canceled and postponed until the heat passes, so it's best to check in with your destination ahead of this holiday weekend. Reporting from Livermore, Gayle Ong, KRON 4 News.
This was the first time scientists were able to monitor the fire burning up a canyon with all their instruments in place. The goal of the experiment to improve wildfire predictions and modeling of fire behavior.
On Monday, CAL FIRE conducted a prescribed burn in the canyon east of the city of Salinas in Monterey County, all part of wildfire mitigation efforts and research.
Canyon fire behavior is very dangerous. Fires in canyons are responsible for many firefighter fatalities around the world. And we don't know a lot about the mechanisms of fire spread in canyons.
Meteorology professor Craig Clements runs the Wildfire Interdisciplinary Research Center at San Jose State University. Clements says this study, called the California Canyon Fire Experiment, was 10 years in the making. It was a joint project with CAL FIRE, PG&E, Hexion, TechnoSilva, and Stella Jones.
We were able to help them monitor the fire behavior as the fire burned their poles. And so now we have this real case, high intensity fire, that they can then show that, the poles actually were able to survive an intense wildfire like this.
Clements installed sensors before the prescribed fire. An infrared camera and drone was also used to collect data.
Well, those two data sets will allow us to understand the fire behavior and all the metrics of fire behavior. At the same time, we were scanning the plume with our Doppler LiDAR and Doppler radar, so we're understanding the winds that flow into the fire.
The Wildfire Research Center team studies major wildfires across the state, but this recent study was the first canyon fire experiment in California. Clements says the first one took place in Portugal more than 20 years ago. He hopes it could happen in California again.
We were able to measure many, many more properties, including the atmosphere, the meteorology, the fire behavior, and the fuels and topography. So it's just this enormous data set that's never been collected on a canyon fire ever. So pretty exciting.
The lab should have preliminary findings in the next month or so. The core preliminary data should be out in 6 months to a year. Gayle Ong, KRON 4 News.
I'm here on San Francisco's Embarcadero, the classic spot to catch the king tides. The high tides are not only a natural phenomenon, they help scientists identify sea level rise vulnerabilities. It's not rain or wind causing water levels to rise. It's gravity, when the sun, moon, and earth align, creating the highest tides of the year, known as the king tides, and they reveal future problems. Video from last month's surge in San Francisco shows a glimpse of how normal tides will look like in the coming decades. During a storm, the astronomical high tides can cause flooding. Scientists look at the flood potential and plan for ways to beat it.
There's only a couple of ways you can really address sea level rise. One is by building a wall and try to keep the water out, but the other way is you retreat. you move back from the edge of the water. I mean, there's not many other ways you can do it.
Ron Hipschman is an educator at the Exploratorium Museum of Science. He's concerned about the city's waterfront and the million-dollar assets surrounding it.
One of the key things that we have to think about is to what degree can we use natural infrastructure, things like wetlands and beaches, to protect us against sea level rise, and to what degree do we need gray infrastructure like levees and seawalls.
David Bihar is the Climate Program Director at San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. Part of his work includes tracking sea level rise in the most vulnerable communities.
On the east side of the city, we're looking at Mission Creek and Islas Creek areas. We're looking at the seawall that dates from the end of the 1800s.
That seawall along the Embarcadero stretches from Fisherman's Wharf down to Mission Creek. It is managed by the Port of San Francisco.
We have localized flooding and sometimes lane closures along the Embarcadero. Well, in the next 30 to 50 years, that could be a daily event for the city.
Brad Benson is leading a citywide effort looking at coastal flood risk and sea level rise with the Army Corps of Engineers, an effort he hopes will lead to $1 billion or more in federal funding over time. Last month, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi passed a bill that will benefit funding for the city and the Bay Area shoreline from flooding.
San Francisco, we're really trying to plan through the end of the century and beyond, because a lot of our assets that we're building today or that we own today are going to be around then. And so we want to know how those assets are going to be resilient to climate change.
By the end of the century, scientists project sea levels on the California coast could rise as much as 7 feet.
What we found through our recent work is the San Francisco waterfront has a very important tipping point between 2 and 3 feet of sea level rise, where we're going to see much more significant damage if we don't build coastal flood protection to protect the city.
As planners look at long-term solutions, anyone can help monitor data by submitting photos to the California King Tides Project's website, an organization that tracks sea level rise. King tides occur once or twice every year in coastal areas. Tides at the Exploratorium Museum are forecasted to peak at about 7 feet high.
King tides that we see today are kind of like the normal tides of tomorrow.
Observers are urged to use caution when visiting the tides, and in the age of COVID, wear your mask. In San Francisco, Gayle Ong, KRON 4 News.
Vicki Grant, that winery owner, has since rebuilt his property. He says this time of year is still difficult for him, but he also says he is more prepared for a fire more than ever. It was early morning, October 8, 2017. The Tubbs fire destroyed Paradise Ridge Winery in Santa Rosa.
I've been thinking about it a little bit more, before it was rebuild and then it was COVID. And then this year it's kind of sinking in.
Co-owner Renee Vick has since rebuilt and is more aware about safety.
I kind of would like to talk about or have people talk about how unfortunately unprepared our community was for this type of natural disaster, what we've learned from that, and what the future looks like.
About 6,000 homes burned to the ground. Santa Rosa got the worst of the fire. The Fountain Grove neighborhood was hit hard by the Tubbs fire. The community virtually wiped out. In fact, this lot used to be someone's home. From above, you can see some homes are still rebuilding 5 years later. This is what the Fountain Grove community looked like then. The Tubbs fire cost more than $1 billion in damages. Some 20,000 people were displaced from their homes. These days, Big spends more time creating defensible space around his winery.
Unbeknownst to us, we kind of set a blueprint in place for how communities deal with natural disasters, the communication that goes out, how early, how often.
This Sunday, Big and Sonoma County Supervisor James Gore will be hosting a commemoration ceremony at Paradise Ridge Winery for fire survivors and first responders.
We're prepared for something like this now, and we can't stop a fire, but we could prevent the huge amount of damage it can cause, and that's what this is about.
And there will be other remembrances this week. And to talk about the lessons learned from the Tubbs fire, and one significant lesson that winery owner says that's improved, early warning. In the studio, Gayle Ong, KRON 4 News.
It's Earth Day today, and KRON 4 continues celebrating Earth Week by drawing attention to some of the biggest environmental challenges in the Bay Area.
And today, as Daria mentioned, on this Earth Day, we're focusing on the California native Tule elk. It's an annual census count that's done every year. They found about 150 Tule elks living out on Point Reyes National Seashore. They've died, likely due to drought conditions. We've got Crown 4's Gayle Ong with a closer look.
Here at Point Reyes National Seashore, animal advocates worry about the Thule elk.
They are a symbol of this area and an amazing conservation success, yet right behind this fence, 152 animals were allowed to die during a drought.
A wildlife photographer found carcasses of the elk throughout the reserve. The photos taken in the summer of last year, one of Marin County's driest year in 90 years. With only receiving 20 inches of rain in 2020. The National Park Service says the Thule elk's population declined in 2020, likely due to drought conditions impacting the elk's food. Tomales Point is home to the largest Thule elk herd on the land. Melanie Gunn is the outreach coordinator at Point Reyes National Seashore.
During drought periods, there's less nutritional value in forage. We don't think it's the quantity of forage, because if the quantity of forage was lacking at Tomales Point, when you would go out into the field, you would see browse lines, and we're not seeing that at all.
A total of 6 necropsies were conducted from the Tomales Point and Drake's Beach herds. Gunn says necropsy findings showed 2 elks ate toxic plants. 2 others had heavy internal parasite loads. 1 had a systemic infection. But Gunn says the elk's declining population shows no evidence of dehydration.
We're having staff go into the field routinely to look at the water sources that we know exist. And if they do dry up, we are looking into bringing in water should we need to.
Gunn adds alternative water sources for the elk are from seeps and springs throughout the reserve. Also sharing the park, dairy and cattle ranchers. This fence was installed at Tomales Point decades ago to isolate the elk from cattle.
This is a national park area. Wild animals are supposed to be protected here, but instead they are dying.
Advocates are calling on the park to remove the fence so the animals can roam free and have access to better food.
The National Park Service says removing the fence will only be considered if ranching activities in the area terminate.
That means the dairy and cattle ranchers who have been here for generations would have to leave. That won't happen anytime soon, according to the National Park Service's 1998 Thule Elk Management Plan.
Part of our job as the National Park Service is to maintain that historic district and that pastoral view and the historic buildings. And the best way to do that is through active inhabitants of the buildings.
The 99-page management plan calls the elk's population decline a natural process during droughts. As of 2021, Marin County is in a moderate drought, with conditions expected to get worse in the summer. These activists say they will keep a close eye on the elk. In Marin County, Gayle Ong, Crown 4 News.